Jailed WNBA star Britney Griner's detention extended 1 month. New video showing her with her head down, covered in an orange hoodie, in handcuffs, leaving a Russian courthouse. Her lawyer saying we can expect that the final charge will be brought soon and the case will be sent to court. Griner, a two-time Olympic gold medalist and three-time All-American basketball player, was arrested in February by Russian customs officials at an airport near Moscow, when she was allegedly caught with a vape cartridge containing hash oil, according to Russian authorities. Griner claims she's innocent. The U.S. says she is wrongfully detained.
We take our responsibility to assist U.S. citizens seriously.
Fans and stars from the professional basketball world sharing their outrage on social media with the hashtag #WeAreBG. NBA point guard Chris Paul wearing a shirt with Griner's face on it.
It's a huge part of the community here. I mean, we all support her, just want to try to get her home as soon as possible.
The WNBA adorning each of their courts with her initials and number, BG42, in her honor. Griner has played professional basketball in Russia the last 7 winters.
What is the hardest part about this for you?
The hardest part is that she is over there trying to feed her family.
Her friend and former coach, Basketball Hall of Famer Don Staley.
I hope I can come back on your show within the next 30 days with great news. Just happy tears of having her home with her family.
Diplomats from the U.S. Embassy spoke with Griner on Friday and reported she is doing well, as can be expected in these circumstances, according to a State Department spokesperson. She's now been imprisoned for more than 80 days and could face up to 10 years in prison if convicted.
What do you want people to know about Britney and the kind of person that she is?
Is it a dire situation? Absolutely. It is. But, Britney's tough. She's tough-minded. She's tough-hearted. Basketball gives you a certain type of strength to endure pretty much everything.
And Isa Gutierrez joins us now. Isa, I understand a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Bill Richardson, has been brought in to try to help negotiate Britney's release.
Yeah, that's right, Gotti. Actually, Britney's family asked for him to get involved. Richardson is known for helping in these situations. He's helped Americans overseas being held be released in the past. Most recently, Trevor Reed, a former U.S. Marine, just last month, who was released in an exchange. He'd been in prison there in Russia for 3 years. So keep in mind, though, Gotti, this is a process that can really take a long time, especially if in the coming months we find out that she has been convicted.
So let me get this straight. Russia really want people to think that this young lady, Britney Griner, took it upon herself to try to sneak out some hash oil in her luggage. Let me tell you this. As many of countries I have traveled to around the world, there are certain things that we know going into the airport. Number 1, you are a female. Number 2, your ass is black. And for her, number 3, she's gay. So that's 3 strikes against you starting out. You can't add nothing else to that automatically. No one is going to be able to tell me that as many airports this young lady has traveled in and out of, that she would try to smuggle some hash oil. It makes no sense. Just say she is a casualty of war, because that's what this is. And it is about time the U.S. got up off of their sorry self and did something to help free this girl to get from out of jail over there in Russia. You get everybody else out of jail that committed some real crimes. So I'm trying to understand, why is she still in there? Do your negotiations like you do for everybody else that's not of black or any other color other than white. Get yourself together and help this young lady. Y'all know damn well that this lady should have been freed a long time ago, and now she's in detention for another 30 damn days in Russia. Do better with y'all sorry self. What people need to understand is that around the world, you are black. And your life does not matter. Period. I don't care what people say. I have been to all types of countries. And at the end of the day, They still see you as a black person, and the value of your black life is a -0. That's the reason why she's not being talked about in the news. That's the reason why she's not on Joe Biden's mind. Because don't forget, he said he would never send his children to a school where black kids attended. Get yourself together and get this girl out of jail, because y'all know that she doesn't belong there. This is ridiculous. Crazy ass shit. Welcome to Straddled Events. On this channel, we bring you the truth. Sometimes the truth is quite ugly, unbearable, and you just don't want to deal with it. But on this channel, you're going to get it anyway. You are straddling between the fence of good versus evil, right versus wrong. And on this channel, we're going to tell you to do better. Let's go.
As the war in Ukraine continues to strain relations between the U.S. and Russia, there's growing concern over the detention of WNBA star Britney Griner, as well as other U.S. citizens detained in Russia. Griner, a two-time Olympic gold medalist who also plays in a Russian league, was arrested in February after authorities allegedly found cannabis oil in her luggage. She could be facing up to 10 years in prison. But is Griner's situation really a hostage-taking by Russia, and how should such cases be handled? Let's meet our guests today. Let's start with you, Jason. Please introduce yourself to our international audience.
I'm Jason Rezaian. I'm a global opinions writer for The Washington Post, and I am the host of the Spotify original podcast, 544 Days, which is about my time as a hostage being held in Iran by the Iranian regime when I was the bureau chief for The Washington Post.
My name is Dave Zirin. I'm the sports editor at The Nation magazine. I'm the host of the Edge of Sports podcast, and I've written 11 books about the politics of sports. The most recent one is called The Kaepernick Effect, Taking a Knee, Changing Uproar. And yet here's Britney Griner, a black LGBTQ woman who is the most recognizable basketball star, I would argue, on the face of the earth. But it's like they don't have a language. The disrespect for women's sports is so ingrained in sports media, and racism, sexism, homophobia, there's so much of that.
Seeing this kind of play out already as if it were that sort of a situation. Dave, the U.S. State Department and private attorneys have called for no international uproar, really silence on this issue. I'm wondering if being silent is effective.
Well, it's clearly not effective, given that Britney Griner faces 10 years behind bars and 5 years at a labor camp. So that should make us all be willing to challenge the State Department line that we should all be silent right now. Mm-hmm. And at my end of the world, I just feel like the strategy has been really wrong, and I mean in the sports community. I mean, there are two wings of the sports community right now in terms of Britney Griner, both of whom I think are failing Britney Griner and failing all of us. First, there's the mainstream sports media community that's just ignoring this. I mean, if Tom Brady was behind bars in Russia, there would be a daily vigil on sports radio. There would be a daily vigil on ESPN. It would be talked about all the time. It would be an international uproar. And yet here's Britney Griner, a black LGBTQ woman who is the most recognizable basketball star, I would argue, on the face of the earth. But it's like they don't have a language. The disrespect for women's sports is so ingrained in sports media, and racism, sexism, homophobia, there's so much of that that it's almost like there's no language to even discuss Britney Griner. Then you have the community of the NBA and the WNBA who seem to be following the State Department dictates to just be silent. Mm-hmm. And yes, I have real doubts if not raising up her name is an effective way to actually raise attention to this and bring her home.
I want to just jump in and add one more thing. I think that this idea that this can be handled quietly with such a public, well-known figure, as Dave pointed out, it's impossible, right? All you have to do is go on change.org and see that there is a petition to free Britney Griner, signed by tens of thousands of people.
Right.
My family put one of those up while I was in prison. 500,000 people signed it over a period of many months. This is not a secret, right? This is something that is happening out in the open. The U.S. government, the WNBA, Britney Griner's family decided not to talk about it. Right. The Russian government made a decision to put this out in the world, right? once that genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
And even if maybe the Ukraine war and the invasion by Russia is a distraction or is, maybe somehow overshadowing her situation, maybe they aren't separate. I mean, it does beg the question, Danny, I'm curious, hearing Jason's comments there, why or why are they continuing to be silent and advocate for silence? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's an excellent question, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. So before I answer, I just want to say, even though I work for the U.S. government, I'm not here today speaking on the U.S. government behalf. So one of the things that I've learned from spending a lot of time talking to former kidnappers is that when they think that the person they're holding is more valuable, that raises the stakes. That makes them ask for more, demand more concessions to get the person home. Mm-hmm. And so a serious fear that we can have about making the case of Britney Griner even more public, if there were people out in the streets, if there was more media attention, all of those things that we're talking about here today, it could actually make it harder to get her home. One of the reasons that I think it is important to raise the stakes and have publicity about her case is about a different audience. It's not about the audience of the Russian government. It's not about changing Vladimir Putin's mind. Publicity actually serves the case to convince the U.S. government that it can't let up on this case. And so if we think about publicity in that way, it's a really kind of different target.
If I could. Dave, you go, and then I got something. Yeah, and I'd also like to play for an audience in a little bit. Some of her teammates' reaction, not teammates, I should say, colleagues in the WNBA, how they're reacting and what they've been saying in terms of finally speaking out a little bit. Dave, go ahead.
Just that I think what we all agree on is that the question of silence and letting the State Department do its work, or the question of having vigils, having demonstrations, agreeing to do shows like this, is that silence is a tactical question. Not a principled question. So what is the best tactic to actually get Britney Griner home should be our question. And the silent route, which apparently started with her arrest in mid-February when nobody knew where she was for several weeks, it just hasn't worked. And when you consider the situation between Russia and the United States right now, in the absence of, which I assume, of diplomatic back channels, or if they're there at all, they're probably not having Britney Griner's name on the front burner.
I know you wanted to jump in, Jason. Let's listen to what Lisa Leslie had to say, another WNBA star, speaking out finally about, why she's been silent and why others like her have. Let's take a listen.
What we were told was to not make a big fuss about it so that they could not use her as a pawn, so to speak, in this situation in the war. So to make it like it's not that important, or don't make it where like free Britney and we start this campaign. Do we know, is that the right thing to do or not? It's heartbreaking. I mean, for all of us to, that's the feelings of it. I mean, you want to do more, and you think, should we all use our social media platform and get behind it? Or not? Like, nobody really, this is the first time we're in a situation you don't know what to do.
Danny, I see that you're nodding as you're listening to Lisa there. I mean, it seems odd that diplomats from the U.S. have yet to put Griner in that category of American travelers who were wrongfully detained, which would free up, or at least allow, more kind of scrutiny and additional attention from the government to kind of solve this. That, with the silence, it does seem to suggest that maybe the silence is actually increasing the likelihood that she's gonna, stay in Russian jail, or even worse. What does it mean to publicize this case? Would you advocate for more people to speak out, including her teammates?
So at the moment, I would say one of the things that we could be advocating for is for the case to be transferred from one corner of the State Department to another.
Okay.
So far, a lot of the press that I have seen talks about consular affairs covering her case. And the point of consular affairs is to visit her in prison, to make sure she's getting, that her rights are being respected and that she's able to have those visits. Consular affairs is not working to get people out of prison. Americans are arrested abroad all the time. And in lots of those cases, we're not trying to negotiate for their release or to pressure them to come home in any sort of way. But there is an office at the State Department, the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, what's known as the SPIHA. And if the SPIHA takes on a case, it means it's elevated to a different diplomatic level. It means you're actually working in some respects to try to get that person home.
And just to clarify for our audience, that has yet to happen in this case. Whether that does happen or not, it is interesting to note that there have been people, including former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, tweeting about this case. We've seen Tim Kaine, a senior Democrat and senator, say that he believes Russia is actually using Britney Griner as a bargaining chip, which would indicate that it's a hostage crisis of sorts, or at least lend some credibility there. I'm curious, Dave, listening to Lisa, listening to what Danny said, and looking at what the WNBA has said in this statement, I want to share it with you. In close collaboration with U.S. government agencies, elected officials, individuals and organizations with expertise in these matters, and Britney Griner's representatives and family, we continue to work diligently to get her safely home to the United States. I hate to put it so bluntly, but Dave, is there proof, or is there hard factual evidence that that's in fact happening, that the government is doing that? I mean, perhaps we assume it.
This is a question of assumptions at this point, not a question of what we actually know to be true. And like I said before, if you're the United States government and you're dealing with Russia and Ukraine, I don't know where Britney Griner is on their list of priorities, but I can't imagine it's very high, and we need to change that. We need to, and so I thought it was so interesting that at the Oscars, I mean, there were things that happened at the Oscars other than the thing we're not going to talk about.
Right.
But there was an amazing short film called The Queen of Basketball. And the director, Ben Proudfoot, when he won the award, what he said was so interesting. He didn't say, Vladimir Putin, please bring Britney Griner home. He said, President Biden, please act to bring Britney Griner home. And I think that's where our focus needs to be. No one's asking the WNBA to occupy the State Department. All I want to see is not this kind of imposed silence. I've spoken to people in the WNBA. People are bursting to want to say something about this, but they're so scared.
And they should.
That if they
should get up and say something. The fact of the matter is, I want to piggyback off of what both Danny and Dave said. There is this notion, as Danny mentioned, that if we talk about it publicly, it raises the stakes.
Right.
But that more has to do with criminal gangs and terrorist organizations. Governments know what they're trying to get when they take an American hostage. Sitting here quietly about it ensures that we are not forcing the U.S. government to do their job. One of their jobs is to protect the rights of citizens while they're abroad. And Davis is 100% right. The United States president, in this case Joe Biden, is the person who's ultimately going to decide over the fate of Britney Griner and dozens of other Americans who are being held right now, because it requires kind of a presidential sign-off that, you know what, we are going to do whatever deal, however unsavory it might be, to free this person.
Right. And on that note, you mentioned that there are more Americans being taken hostage by sort of state governments. I think it's 19 publicly known U.S. nationals being held by militant or criminal groups. But when it comes to states, it's about 43 being wrongfully detained. And, that's quite a disparity. Before we kind of break that down a little bit, I do want to take a quick moment and just kind of there have been comments, let's say, in the YouTube chat, and people are asking, why did she go to a country that your country has beef with? What was Britney doing in Russia? And I think these are important questions. Perhaps people don't know that roughly half of all WNBA players actually play overseas in autocratic countries, and a lot of it has to do with how they're treated, what they're paid. I mean, 5 to 8 times as much their salaries in the States. Dave, what can you share with us about this point?
Well, I can share the difference between making $60 grand a year and making an extra $1 million a year. Because in other countries, and some of them are autocratic countries like Russia, they tend to treat women's basketball players a great deal better than we do in the United States, where the WNBA is a very salary capped and low salary league relative to the revenue that they produce. And so for women's basketball players, going overseas is not some option. It's not, a fun way to see the world after the WNBA season. I mean, it's a question of making as much money as they can before their career inevitably ends, probably in their late 20s or early 30s. So that's what Britney Griner was doing over there. She was a champion basketball player in Russia. And that's the other part of this, like the idea that airport security didn't know exactly who she was. when they approached her is another part of this story that we have to say it just beggars belief that their story that a dog smelled hashish oil in her bag and that's how we've gotten down this road. It's like, come on, please don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining.
Danny, when you go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say that there's actually 3 Americans currently being detained in Russia. They're Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed, who've been held for several years. And my understanding is that they were arrested shortly after the United States arrested 2 Russian intelligence agents. And so you can see with those cases that it is almost a very clear tit for tat, that Russia is holding these Americans because they want to get these 2 agents home. With Britney Griner's case, I mean, in some senses, from Russia's perspective, it's maybe irrelevant whether or not she had any illicit substances in her bag or not, because they are going to be acting as if she does. They are going to be acting as if this is a legitimate arrest, even if the entire purpose is to hold her hostage and to use her for foreign policy leverage as part of their war in Ukraine. And so we can see that she is, this is a really difficult moment for an American, for a famous American, for a Black